Hi. Hi. So I guess the next speaker, we know all about him. He likes coffee, right?
Yes.
Yes. But he also knows to play trumpet.
How did you know that?
Oh, well, little bird told me.
Oh no.
Oh, yes. And he also likes to program drones if you, yeah. Do you use Kotlin for that?
Not
Not
yet.
yet, but who knows? So,
But yes.
so the next talk is very interesting. It's about magic. And so that's it. Mark.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Oh, thank you. Well, hey, thanks for coming. And I did not expect the trumpet thing to come back and haunt me. I actually do play classical trumpet. I've played in an orchestra before. That's just kind of for fun. I don't do that like in my day job. Probably a good thing. So anyway, so welcome to this morning's session on springing into Kotlin, or as I like to call it, how to make the magic even more magical. My name is Mark Heckler. I'm going to actually step out from here and then walk back and forth a little bit. I like to move, and once I start coding, I can't move. My name is Mark Heckler. I'm a principal technologist and Spring developer advocate with Pivotal Software Inc. Pivotal are the makers of such fine software components as the Spring Framework, Spring Boot, RabbitMQ, Greenplum, Gemfire, huge contributor to Apache Tomcat, and a huge contributor to the Cloud Foundry Common Code Line. We're a tiny little startup in Silicon Valley. Perhaps you've heard of us. Not so tiny anymore, actually. We just had our initial public offering a few months ago on the New York Stock Exchange, and everybody's really excited about that. I still haven't been home, so it is what it is. But anyway, I blog semi-regularly, admittedly not as often as I'd like, but I do from time to time blog at thehecklers.com, my personal domain, as well as on the spring.io blog from time to time. And I tweet very regularly at mkheck. Is anyone here on Twitter? Wow. Come on, it's 2018. You should be on Twitter. Twitter finally turned a profit in 2017. So I think it's going to be around for the long haul. So that's good, right? So please, if you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter. It's the best way to connect to your favorite open source committers. So please do hop on there. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, because they tell me we only have like 3 hours here today, right? A little less? Okay, only 50 minutes, so that's kind of sad. But anyway, I'm here all day, but I'm on Twitter like forever. So if you have any questions, comments, feedback, please do reach out to me on Twitter. That is the absolute level best way to reach me. I am kind of on Twitter from sunup to sundown and times in between. I have been known to wake up in the middle of the night, grab my phone off my nightstand in whatever city I'm in, and tweet, even then, which is probably a kind of a sad indication of my life, but there you have it. I made the comment a few months ago, and I was actually trying to make a joke that I live on Twitter and I spent more time on Twitter than I did at my house. And then I got to figuring it up, and I actually do spend more time on Twitter than I do at my house. So again, sad statement. But that's the best way to reach me. If you can't find it in your heart to get on Twitter, if you just have more feedback or comments that don't fit in 280 characters, I am a member of the slightly older and more established social network called email. Is anyone on email? Okay, good. Get on email. It's going to be a thing. But I, like you, I have about a half a dozen email addresses. These two are my two favorites. They're the two that I check the least infrequently. I don't live on email, but I do check them from time to time. So please do reach out to me. That's fine. Again, though, Twitter is the best way. So who am I? I've co-authored a couple of books. I've authored several blogs and blog posts. I'm a frequent event speaker. This is my third time to Beograd, so very deep thanks for having me back. I don't know why, lapse in judgment, but I'm here and I really appreciate it. So they let me in. I don't know why they did, but I'm grateful for that. And thanks for coming. I am a developer, and as you might guess from the next bullet point, where most of my expertise has been won, it's been in the realm of Java. I am a Java champion, voted in by a group of my peers for ongoing contributions to the greater Java community. So if you had anything to do with that, thank you, Rustam. And I am a seeker of a better way and a pursuer of efficiency and elegance, as are you, right? Or you wouldn't be here. So this is good. Over the years, Java has gotten a reputation as being somewhat verbose. And I don't really have a problem with Java's verbosity, because as they say, the compiler reads your code once. You read your code every day. So verbosity, if it leads to clarity, is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you can say the same thing and say it in less code and keep the clarity, that's a good thing too, right? So that's what we refer to as conciseness. Not terseness. Terseness, you lose context. But conciseness is good. And that's where Kotlin comes in. So I always feel a little bit guilty about the title, about how to make the magic even more magical. But a lot of times people, who here is a Spring developer? Let me ask that. So I'm sure none of you has ever heard the statement that Spring has too much magic. Never, right? You've never heard that. I always like to point to this quote by Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Here's the secret, folks. Spring isn't magic. It's technology. It's sufficiently advanced technology. So if you want to code your own entity managers and persistence contexts, you can do that. If you want to shut off all of Spring Boot's auto configuration, you can do that. But it'll make you about 100 times less productive, right? That's why we use it. That's why we like it. That's why it was created. So again, how can we make that a bit more magical? And again, the answer comes back to Kotlin. So what are the goals for this session today? Pretty simple, really. I want to answer the whys, why you would consider a move to Kotlin, or at least a partial move, a transition, shall we say. Why switch from Java? With Java's tighter release schedule, I mean, isn't it bringing out new functionality faster? Well, yes, but it's still kind of playing catch-up in a lot of ways. Java has 20 years of legacy, right? And it has been extremely, extremely good and diligent about maintaining backward compatibility, at least up until the disaster that was Java 9, right? That's a bit unfortunate. But I'm kidding. It wasn't a total disaster, right? But it did introduce some wrinkles in the compatibility front. So with Kotlin, you have a bit of liberty to go ahead and experiment a bit, to step out a bit. The Kotlin designers are not reckless at all, but they do have a bit more latitude to go ahead and move forward a bit faster than Java does. Many times you see functionality and features that are being proposed for Java that are already in Kotlin, which is why sometimes I refer to Kotlin as Java++, right? Because if you think that there's something that's coming into Java that you're really excited about, chances are it's already in Kotlin. So just keep that in mind. Coming back to this, what do we gain? Is it worth it? I think you'll see by the end of this session, I believe very strongly that it is. I think you will believe that as well. So starting out, what are some quick victories that we can expect? What are the best ways to maximize, with very little effort, to maximize our benefit from considering a transition to Kotlin? And then how do we lay groundwork for long-term gains? So we need to define a problem domain, right? I code. That's where I live, is in the IDE. So I feel like, and I do feel like that's the best way to see things, is to see them in action, and you kind of understand them better. At least I do. So when I do a demo, when I write code for an audience, I try to think of something that everybody can identify with, that it means something to you. And I don't know what everybody here likes, so I always kind of have to go back to what do I like, right? Because I have to assume that we're all at least fairly similar. And as was pointed out earlier, I love coffee. So anytime you talk to me, anytime you see me, we're probably going to be talking about coffee at some point, right? And no, I'm not obsessed, regardless of what the doctors say, right? I am an aficionado. So is everybody still out there? OK, good. All right, cool. So let's code. Hopefully it won't go like this. Does anyone recognize this gentleman? Yes, OK, a couple. For those of you who don't, let me quote another one of my favorite shows. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That's Doctor Who, by the way, if anybody didn't recognize that. So the good news is we're coming up on a weekend. you can go watch this, right? It's on Netflix. This is called The IT Crowd. It was a Britcom. It was out of the UK about 4 or 5 years ago. They only did 2 seasons of it, but it was just an amazing show. It hits really close to home in our field, right? So for better and worse. This is Maurice Moss. He's one of the protagonists. And just a super great character, my hero. So if you haven't watched it, look up The IT Crowd. You'll thank me later. So we'll stop there, and let's get started. So does anyone recognize this site? This is the Spring Initializer. For those of 5 who didn't, just kidding. Who let the JavaScript folks in? I'm kidding again. Okay. This is your starting point for Spring Boot-based microservices on the web, right? You don't have to go here. You can write them, start off from scratch, build your own POM or Gradle build file. You can curl this. You can HTTP it. You can use it from your IDE. I like to go to the site because it's so pretty. I'm not a designer, though. What do I know? So let's get started. Now, I will say this. If you have the opportunity to start a greenfield application in Kotlin, that's great. That is awesome because it gives you a clean starting point, clean slate. But most of us work with a lot of existing code, right? Brownfield applications. So I'm going from the assumption you're probably going to be starting from a brownfield application and migrating. So let's whip one up really quickly in Java, and then we'll migrate it. And you can kind of see from the starting point, kind of understand the structure of the program, as well as how it makes sense to migrate while we go. So with the Spring Initializer, you can go through the long form and choose the libraries that you want to bring in, the dependencies. These are version synchronized. This is one of the values of boot. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go to the simple version and start off with kind of an opinionated approach, even to that. But even with this, what it allows you to do is simplify your dependency management, and you choose your dependencies, and it creates your starter project. You zips it up, you download it, you unzip it, and you're off and running. It doesn't generate code. It generates the project file itself. So what you basically you have, well, is in terms of code, it does give you your main application class and your main method, but it gives you a jumping off point, so you can immediately start coding and be very productive. But even with this simplified version, you have options. So if you're a Maven developer, you can generate a Maven project. If you're a hipster, you can generate a Gradle project. So now, I actually do have my hoodie here, even though I'm not wearing it. So I'm feeling hipstery today. So we're gonna be hipsters together. I'm gonna generate a Gradle project here. You can use Java, Kotlin, or Groovy. In Spring Framework 5, released last fall, that was one of the big stories, right? Is full first-class support for Kotlin. This is very important. It was a decision that was not made lightly. Kotlin is here to stay. The largest Java framework with the greatest share of enterprise applications delivering real business functionality in the entire world is the Spring Framework. And Kotlin is now a full first-class supported citizen in that. The largest cell phone or mobile operating system in the world now endorses Kotlin as the preferred way. That's Android, by the way. The preferred way to develop applications. Kotlin is a big deal. And again, I think you know that or you wouldn't be here. So I'm gonna actually create a Kotlin project. This is what I recommend. Even if you have a brownfield application, you start by creating a Kotlin project, a build file. So then you can bring those properties over into your existing build file, and you don't mistype something, you don't miss anything like that. So I'm gonna start with the Kotlin project. I'll just switch it back to Java, and we'll be off and running. But that way, it makes sure I don't mistype anything. We're going to use the current version of Spring Boot 2.0.6. I'm going to just change this to the Heckler's, my personal domain. We're going to create a coffee service. Again, this is important stuff here we're working on. Has to involve coffee. I'm going to bring in the dependency for web. Again, we're assuming these are brownfield applications. We're probably using Spring MVC. Spring, the web dependency brings in Tomcat and Spring MVC, so that's fine. I'm going to use MongoDB for my database. Anybody here work for MongoDB? Okay, I'll be kind, all right? Mongo is the butt of a lot of jokes. I even make a few of them myself. Spring is too, you know. But to be honest with you, I pick on things I love. So even if I do pick on Mongo a little bit, know that I do deeply respect it as a company and as a database. Mongo is one of the 4 databases that has, well, in fact, it was the first, to provide fully reactive drivers for their data store, and Spring Data supports that, so it's all the way to the stack reactive, or all the way to the metal reactive. So that's pretty awesome. But I will probably dish it a little bit, just so you know. So I'm going to use Mongo. Mongo, again, is an awesome data store, and heck, I don't care if it saves my data or not, so, right? So, just kidding. Okay, so I'm going to save that to my desktop. We're off to a good start, yeah. So let's see, we'll save that to my desktop, and I will open that, unzip that, open it, in my favorite IDE, NetBeans. Ha, just kidding. Okay, so who here, just a quick survey, who here uses NetBeans? Okay, couple. Eclipse? Really? I mean, that's good, that's good. Just kidding. We actually have a build of Eclipse called Spring Tool Suite where we add some cloud deployment features. And every time I see the latest iteration, I kind of wistfully look at it because it looks better and better. I'm an IntelliJ kind of developer. It just kind of fits my workflow a little bit better, especially when you're using Kotlin. As you'll see, there are some neat capabilities, and these capabilities will find their way into Eclipse and NetBeans. I'm sure of it, but it's a little bit of a catch-up because JetBrains sponsors Kotlin as well as creates IntelliJ, so it's obviously a little more, probably a little more in tune. So, okay, so we have our project, so let's go ahead and take a look at our, what in the world? What? I'm going to have to go back out and try this again. So let's see. Open. Yes, overwrite. Delete, open. We'll see if that gets us what we need. And for some reason, you know what? I'm just gonna bring this somewhere else. So let's drag this to. Well, let's create this. Let's see. Heapcon. Let's drag that into there. Oh, come on. Let's see here. There we go. More than one way to get there. Okay, so let's open that up. Yes. Delete. Oh, that's much better. Okay, so I'm not really sure why it's giving me this this error here, this warning. I'm sure that's probably fine. So where do we start? Whoa, I said I was going to start with a Java project, and this looks very un-Java, doesn't it? The first thing I would recommend to you, and this is it's not an absolute requirement, necessity, but in my mind it kind of is to create a parallel set of packaging. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. For some reason, this is just not, you know what? I'm just going to clean this up entirely. Hold on. We'll move this HC2. I'm going to just copy this in here. This is how you know it's live. Things don't always work perfectly. So that looks fine. Open, open, open. That looks much better. Let's go over here and look at our, much better. Okay, so the first thing I want to point out is that you have a package structure here under our source main Kotlin, in this case because I created a Kotlin application. What I would suggest to you is that it's a good practice. I always hate the term best practice, but it's a very good practice to actually mirror that package structure under your source main Kotlin, because under source main Java. So that way, as you migrate things, you can move them from one directory to the other, one package structure to the other, and you can kind of keep track on where you are in your migration progress, right? So I'm going to create a new package here, and we will mirror that. So Java and Kotlin now has the same package structure. Now, what I'm going to start off with is just turning this back into a Java project. So the first thing I'm going to do is rename this from a coffeeserviceapplication.kt to coffeeserviceapplication.java. Very simple, right? And then I'm going to drag this up here just to get where it should be. You don't have to do that, but I'm a little OCD, and again, I think it's a good practice to get into, a good habit to get into. So I'm going to just wipe this out. We're going to go back and make this a Java application very simply. Spring application.run, coffee service application.class, args, And there we have it. So I'm going to run that and make sure that I haven't borked something here. Oh, this is one thing. Kotlin does not require you to have semicolons. Java does, if you haven't noticed. So I'm going to make sure that I have my semicolons back in there, and let's try that again. And while that's coming up, I'm going to bring up my build.gradle file and give you a very quick tour of that. Oh dear. OK, so for some reason, we're still pulling in an old version of Kotlin. Let me go ahead and clear that out, bring that up to 1.2.71. So there are a few things here that I'd like to point out to you. One is the Spring Boot Gradle plugin. That's no big deal. That's, as you might expect. You have a Kotlin Gradle plugin, which understandably kind of brings together the Kotlin compilation. And then you have this Kotlin all open. In Java, classes are open by default, right? They're extensible by default unless you make them final. Kotlin is just the opposite. They're closed for extension by default. So if you want to extend them, if you want to modify them, you have to add the open class, the open keyword to your class definition, your class declaration. So that's good. It's a little more secure, a little more snug by default. However, when you're dealing with interacting with Java libraries, as we will be for some time to come with Kotlin, you have to have a bit of a pragmatic approach. Kotlin all open plugin means that you can define certain annotations to provide on your classes so that if you have the annotation, you don't have to go open, 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 open all the time. With the Kotlin Spring plugin wrapper for the Kotlin all open plugin, what that does is take some well-known annotations from the Spring world, like at component, at configuration, at async, at transactional, things like that, at service, and open those up for you without having to go through and specify any of those. So that saves you a little bit of time. And then again, that's just a pragmatism type thing. You also see a couple of options here for free compiler args XJSR 305 strict. This allows you to define your API, what is nullable and what is not null, determined and guaranteed to not be null. So if you have a return type or a parameter for a method, you can define those as nullable, or the whole thing is not null. We also see a JVM target of 1.8 because Kotlin defaults to a JVM target of Java 6. Anyone know why? Android. But we're on the back end. We don't care. We can take it up to 8, minimum 8, right? So we're a little bit further along than that. So that's cool. And we see here that our other stuff here are dependencies, and that's all pretty standard stuff. So let's go back over to our app. We see that it started. We see that it's running. So we have our basic Java app. So let's go ahead and build that out really quickly. I'm going to provide just a few basic classes to get things running. So let's see. I'm going to create a new, let's see. Boom, boom. And we'll create a new class. Let's start with our domain. Again, this is a coffee service, so we need a coffee class. I'm going to annotate this as @document because we indicate that we're storing this in Mongo, when Mongo cooperates, of course, when it feels like it. So we're going to create a private string ID, right? Annotate this as ID. And then what other fields do we need? I'm going to keep this pretty simple. I'm going to have a coffee type, which is the name of the coffee per se, and then a code that I'm going to use to kind of slugify the type and make it a bit more searchable by name, if you will. And that's probably sufficient as it goes. Let's see, we'll need a constructor. So we need an Args constructor for marshalling and unmarshalling from JSON using Jackson. We also need a constructor, single argument constructor for type so that we can just provide the type. Mongo will dutifully provide us with the ID, right? The ID for our coffee. And code is a derived value, a derived member variable. So that's fine. So now we need some getters and setters, some accessors and mutators. But again, our code is a derived value, so we need to change this a bit. We'll provide the type, and then we will set the code equal to, let's say, type.replace. We'll replace spaces with a dash, and then we'll two lowercase the whole thing. So you kind of give an idea what we're doing. And again, since it's derived, I'm going to make this private so not anybody can muck about with it. When we set the type, we need to also do a set code, right, with our type. And then with our constructor, right? Let's see, we probably should just do a set type with type, right? That should work, because then that will go ahead and call our set code. So that's OK. That's almost there. We have our getters and setters and our constructors. We probably should have some equals and hash codes in there so we can do comparisons. Yep, that's good. And then we probably will want in here also our toString. OK, so that's a very simple domain class, right? But it has quite a bit of boilerplate text with it. So that's pretty much situation normal, right? So let's go ahead and create a bit more. Let's go ahead and create our repository. So let's see, coffee repository. This is an interface. We're going to extend our CRUD repository as defined in Spring Data. Again, this is part of Spring Boot's magic, right? If you extend an interface defined in Spring Data and you have a database driver in your class path, Spring Boot puts those two things together and says, hey, you probably want to talk to a database. Not a great logical leap, not really magic, but OK. So we're going to do that. We're going to store objects of type coffee with IDs of type string. And that's sufficient to get us some basic operations on our repository, which acts as a proxy bean for us at interacting with our data store. This will give us the ability to find by an ID or delete by an ID or find all, delete all, to get a count, things like that. But what if we want to provide a bit more capability? It's actually very simply done. You can, by convention, specify a method signature that you want your repository bean to provide. So we want to return an optional of coffee, right? And we'll call this find coffee by, code. And we'll expect, of course, to provide a code to do that, code. And now we're off and running with that. So now we need, I guess just to keep things fairly simple, we need some kind of an external API, a controller. So we're going to create a coffee controller. And let's see, we're going to first need to inject, final, our coffee repository, repo. And what kind of an API will we need? Well, we know that we'll probably want to return an iterable of all of our coffees, right? Get all coffees. Let's see, so return repo dot find all. Pretty simple, right? Just a straight pass through. I probably should indicate that this is a REST controller, right? And we'll start off with our request mapping for our base URL of coffees. Perfect. So this is a get mapping, so we'll get our list of coffees. We also want to be able to get a particular coffee by its ID. So let's see here. There we go. So let's see. We'll want to return an optional of coffee here as well. Get coffee by ID, string ID. And we'll use a path variable to grab that. So return repo dot find by ID. Pretty simple there as well. We also need a search functionality because we can envision that baristas around the world will use this, right? This is going to be big someday. So we want to provide a get mapping with a search. And we want to return an optional of coffee here. So let's see, find, we'll do search for coffee. Sounds like it would be an awesome movie title, doesn't it? The search for coffee. So I'm going to use a request parameter here. What if they don't provide it? We probably don't want to require that. That way we can provide a house blend or a coffee flavor of the day or what have you. So let's see, we'll use we'll search for by code, right? So string code. So there we go. Return repo dot find coffee by code. We just created that. So we're in business there. Now, we did say that this is not required. So if they don't provide a request parameter, this could be kind of bad, right? So we probably should check to see if the code equals null, so we can do something specific that we want to do with that. Otherwise, if the code doesn't equal null, we'll just do this. So principle of least astonishment, we should probably have some kind of useful return here. So we'll do a repo.find all.iterator next. Sure, because that'll get us our first coffee in the list. So I don't know, any Starbucks fans here? You know that every Starbucks you go into, there's always Pike Place. Love it or hate it, it's always there. So this will return our Pike Place, right? This will return our flavor of the day. Your needs may vary, alter according to your use case. So The only thing left we have to do is create some sample data. So I'm going to go back to our application class, and let's just create a command line runner bean to go ahead and dump some data in there to start off with. Command line runner is a functional interface defined in Spring Boot with a single abstract method. When you have a functional interface with a single abstract method, what can you provide as its implementation? A Lambda, right? As of Java 8, like 3-4 years ago now. So we can provide a Lambda that will give us our implementation. So I'm going to do a demo data. I'm going to inject my coffee repository so we can do something with that. And let's do this. So return args. Here's our Lambda. So this is the most important part of the entire talk. I'm serious. This is a data-driven talk, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So we need good data here. We're going to create an array of coffee names. So I'll start off with Pike Place, because I've already mentioned that. So that's a name or a type of coffee. Does anyone have one that they like, a favorite of theirs in particular? No one? You do drink coffee, right? I mean, I haven't somehow stumbled into a tea drinker's room. Tell me no, please. Okay, good. I mean, I like hot tea too as well, by the way. I switched to that at like 11 p.m. so I can sleep. But no, really? Nobody has a favorite coffee? Yes? What is it? Black Diamond. Oh, is that a local roast? Oh, and now you see the other reason I do this, because now I get good recommendations. All right, Black Diamond. Anyone else? I saw a hand over here. It was a Black Diamond too? Okay. All right. All right. What is it? Cinnamon latte. Oh, good. I was afraid you were going to say pumpkin spice here. Cinnamon latte. I'm not big on the sweet drinks. I like pumpkin spice. I like pumpkin pies. Love pumpkin pies. But not as big on the pumpkin spice latte. It's not horrible. Just not for me. Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'm going to give you one that's a local favorite where I come from, back home, St. Louis, kind of center of the U.S. It's called Caldi's Coffee. Really good. There's a little cute story about a little shepherd named Caldi. Anyway, it's good stuff. Great roast, especially their dark roast. Just superb. Okay, let's see. Well, I guess we'll stop there. But if you think of another one, shout it out. Stop me. It's that important, right? Again, good data means good presentation. So, okay, I'm going to stream those, and we'll map each of those. So this is our coffee type. Can't type. So coffee type, we'll create a new coffee from that. Let's see, so we'll just pass the type, and then we will do a for each, and we'll do a repo save with a method reference. So there we go. That's good. But it's not great. I like to see what's going on once it's all said and done and verify that we really have in there what we think we have in there. So what I'm going to do is do a repo.findAll.forEach, and then we'll just do a system.out print line again so we can kind of see get a list of all of them that's in there once it's done. And we're going to be starting this and restarting this each time. So each time it's going to try to save the same coffees to Mongo. And, you know, even with Mongo, it's probably going to save some of these, right? He's going, why did I come to this? I've got to do this. Anyway, I'm just kidding. So, okay, we'll do a repo.deleteAll, and we'll make sure that everything's cleaned out, start it each time we start it, and let's run this and test it and make sure it all works. And then let's convert it. Oh, what did I do here? Oh, yes, I've got to wrap it using the optional. Silly me. Okay. Shortcuts sometimes get you. So we have here our list of coffees. Looks like they're being stored just fine. Let's go ahead and test that out. I like to use HTTP instead of curl because it's much prettier and it's much more useful. You can actually omit the host name if you're just hitting local host, which is nice. We see that we have a nice listing of our coffees right here. That's good. So if I want to grab a particular one by its ID, I can do that. If I want to search, type equals, let's grab that cinnamon latte. Oh, actually it's code. I did a code equals, didn't I, in this one? Okay, that's fine. So we'll just do a cinnamon latte. And I'm using Z shell, so I need to quote that. And everything's fine. If I actually don't provide any search value, it comes up with Pike Place. So we've got our basic default. So here's our brownfield application. Now let's take this to Kotlin. This is where it gets really exciting. So hold on to your seats, okay? What I recommend you start with is your domain class, because as you can see, we've got a lot of improvement we can do right here. This is just quite verbose. So the first thing I would recommend you do is to rename this from coffee.java to coffee.kt. I'm going to go through this one manually so you can kind of see all the steps, and I can kind of show you a few neat features of Kotlin. So we rename it, and as you can see, IntelliJ already places the little k there. It knows this is a Kotlin class now. The problem is, of course, and this is, again, not an absolute necessity, but for me it is, it's in the Java package structure. So we need to fix that. Let's drag this down to our Kotlin package structure. Now it's where it belongs, right? Now, we need to get to work and change this. We can't just run it as is. There are rules here. This isn't groovy, right? So we need to do something. No groovy fans, huh? Wow, usually I get things thrown at me when I say that. But anyway, so the first thing we're going to start off with, you probably noticed that the public modifier here, visibility, is kind of gray. That's because the default visibility in Kotlin is public, so that's superfluous. We don't need that. And constructors are handled a bit differently. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of bring this down here and do that. And we'll come back to this here in a moment. But in Kotlin, in Java, you have usually a handful of constructors, a lot of constructors with varying sets of parameters, right? We don't need that in Kotlin. Typically in Kotlin, you have a single primary constructor that will do everything. You can have secondary constructors if you need them. Most of the time you don't with the capabilities you have with name parameters and default values and things like that. But you can define your primary constructor right here in the class header. So we'll do that. I'm just going to bring this up. So here we have our ID, right? And you can make this a var, so it's mutable. You can get and set it. Or you can make this a val, so it's immutable. It's like a Java final. You can set it once. That's it. 0 one time. That's it. In Kotlin, you have the variable name or value name, then the type, not the other way around, as in Java. And that gets us started. Now, if you didn't place this here, the val or the var, all this is a parameter that's being passed in. We actually want to make this ID a property. In Java, we have member variables that we expose via getters and setters. In Kotlin, you have properties that you expose either for getting and setting or for getting only or for setting only or what have you. You control that, but it's a little different concept. We're defining this as both a parameter into the constructor as well as a property of ID. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for our type, val type, string. OK, so that gets us our constructor. We do need to say, though, or I do need to say at this point that our ID is of type string. In Kotlin, oh boy, OK, so we're going to zip this along. In Kotlin, it is null safe. You know it is always a string if you define it as a string. There's no chance it can be null. It is a string. What if you want to allow null values? Then you add a question mark to it. So instead of a string, it's now a string. You can tell the difference by the inflection, right? String, string. So it's kind of a question mark, right? That's the question mark. It can have a null value. Now, since Mongo is going to be providing this for us, we don't want to have to specify this. I'm going to just say the default value is null. That's fine in this case. Not something you see all the time, but in this case, it makes sense. We're going to assign a default value for our type and make it non-nullable. Keep it as just a string. We'll say any old Joe. So that will be our default type if we don't provide any. OK, we'll come back to code. With our constructor defined, we can get rid of these constructors. They're no longer needed. We also, since we have properties, we don't need our getters and setters. Those are provided just kind of default. Now, we still are left with our equals, our hash code, and our toString. But Kotlin has the concept of a data class, which provides equals, hash codes, and toString, as well as a couple other things like a copy function and component in functions and what have you. But for classes, for objects that are basically data buckets, that you put data in and get that out, it makes a lot of sense to make that a data class. So I'm going to, with the data class, we don't need to provide this, or even our toString. But what if we want to override a method? Can we do that? And of course, the answer is sure, you can do that. So it's very easy. I'm going to just do this here and make this. We're going to override our function. In Kotlin, there are no methods, they're functions. And the key word for a function is fun, which leads us to the natural statement in Kotlin that in Kotlin, it's always fun, right? So it's always fun in Kotlin. So we have our overridden toString function. And with Kotlin as well, when we have a single expression that forms the entirety of our method, we don't have to do our brackets and a return statement. We just do a direct assignment. Get rid of that semicolon, right? So now we're just doing a direct assignment. You can also see that there's type inference. It's saying, I think you're going to be returning a string here, right? You can actually specify what type you want to return, but most of the time the type inference does it for you. It's kind of nice. And then we're left with this mess, which you're typically used to seeing in Java when you have any kind of toString or string concatenation function. So with Kotlin, you have string templates, which cleans this up pretty nicely. We can just embed this, right? So coffee ID equals $ID. So that will embed the value, the current value of ID. We'll do the same thing. Let me just close that out. We'll do the same thing with our type. We haven't done anything yet with our code, but we will. So here we have $code. And much nicer, right? Now, let's do something with this code. And I can't believe that shifted down like that. That's just, there, much better. OK, so there are several ways that you can provide the implementation for code. I'm going to do one that's not the typical way it's done, just so I can show you a capability in Kotlin. Kotlin has what are called extension functions. So if you have a closed class, you can actually extend it. The string class, for example, is a closed class. But you can do something like this, a top-level function. Just put it anywhere. String dot double length, or something, length. So you can define an extension function that will extend all of your string instances in your application. This is very nice. I'm going to do this right now for our coffee.code. Code equals, I can't even type now. This is horrible. So I'm going to take the current instance of my coffee, in this case, when this is called. We're going to grab the type. I'm going to replace any spaces with dashes. And then I'm going to lowercase that. And we can do that. You can also do an extension value. So we can do a get here. And that works as well. But we have the code right here, right? So an extension function really kind of doesn't make sense in this particular case. So let's go ahead and bring this up where it belongs, typically. And let's see, code equals. Val code equals. I get ahead of myself sometimes. So that's it. Now, if you didn't want or need to override any of this, if you didn't need to provide any derived values, your whole domain class can look like that. How much easier is that to debug? A lot, right? You went from pages of code, boilerplate, to one line. So it's pretty powerful. So that's not bad. Since we are very close on time, I'm going to just convert everything at once and test it at the end, because it's always good to test everything in one shot, right? It always works. Yeah, you know where I'm coming from. It's perfect. So let's go ahead up here, and we'll do our controller or coffee repository. I'm going to try something here and just show you this. Here's another reason why I like to use IntelliJ. Yeah. And you know, what can go wrong, right? So let's do this. And to be honest with you, with a 3-line interface, not much. So that worked pretty well. We see here that IntelliJ is rightfully seeing this as a Kotlin class now. I'm going to just drag their Kotlin interface. So I'm going to drag that down. We'll go to our coffee controller. We'll do the same thing. So let's see, code, convert Java file to Kotlin. Now here it's giving us a warning saying, hey, this may affect other things. You want me to try to clean that up too? Sure, why not? So that looks, and this is one of those interesting things. It's not always consistent, because here we have converted our methods to functions, except for this one, which converted to a val. It's kind of odd. So we'll change that. We'll fix that. I'm going to go through this rather quickly. We'll skip our val and come back to that in a moment. Here we see that we can just, again, assign just do a direct assignment, and that cleans that up a bit. Let me just shorten that. We can also, again, with type inference, we can eliminate these. We don't have to specify these, and we can see that, indeed, it actually does it for us. The sharp-eyed among you may see that that exclamation point is after coffee. That's because we're dealing with a Java library. And if we go and look at our find by ID, we can see that we're expecting a class of type T, which may be a Java class. So at that point, the Kotlin compiler says, I can't with 100% certainty assume that this will be a not nullable class. So I have to just warn you here that this may be nullable. I'm going to put this exclamation point as your sign. Oh, we're going to go a little faster here. So that's pretty good. We can remove this because we've already indicated this is an optional parameter. I'm going to just assign this as well. I'm going to, again, return or remove the returns. With Kotlin, your if-else statements are not statements, they're expressions. They do direct evaluations and return types directly. So I'm going to clean that up a bit. Let's see, direct assignment. So we can make this a bit more idiomatic with a first. And in this case, I should say instead of just checking equal to null, we can do an is null or empty. This is an example that it should actually check. Kotlin has smart casts. Once you determine that something is not null, if you don't directly act on that value, it says, I know this isn't null. You don't have to keep checking that it's null. But in this case, for whatever reason, it's still thinking it could be, even though we have an is null or empty. I've spoken with the designers about this. This will be fixed at some point. It just isn't yet. So we need to somehow let Kotlin know that we know this will not be nullable. I'm going to use the not null assertion operator, sometimes known as the hold my beer operator, because this is just telling Kotlin to don't do a null check on this. I know it won't be null. It's fine. Don't use that very often, folks. Use that with great care and with great caution. But in this case, we know it's OK. So I'm going to change this, make this an internal fun, all coffees. Do a direct assignment. And there we go. OK, so we're OK there. The only thing that we have left to do is convert our main application. And let's see. So let's go ahead and do that. Then we'll run it, and we'll wrap up. So this will be really quick. There we go. We can get rid of the whole companion object thing. If you're interested in why it's doing that, come see me. I'll happily explain that later. But in the interest of time. So this is a top-level function. We'll make this a bit more idiomatic for Kotlin. Run application. We'll provide the Kotlin class instead of the Java class here. And that's good. We'll clean up our command line runner with a Kotlin idiomatic approach to doing that. Yeah, this is like speed coding here. OK, so we change this from an arrays as list to a list of. Kotlin has type inference. We can do that. We can kill the stream because it automatically streams. If you have a single parameter lambda, you don't even have to provide that. Just say type equals it, because that's our lambda parameter. We can remove this and clean up our lambdas a bit more. Once again, here as well. And now let's run it. I wasn't kidding. This is fast and easy, right? So changes have been made. Why is this? Keep memory changes. So what did I do here? So I probably just broke something, didn't I? Coffee.kt. Expecting. Oh. OK, so just finishing that up. And then we go back here. That's right. OK, so let's try that again. OK, everything works. Let's go ahead and really quickly test this. We have our coffees. We have our ID. We'll grab the Caldi's coffee ID. That works. We'll do a search with no parameters. That works. And we'll do a code equals. And we'll grab one of our codes here, cinnamon latte. And That works. OK, so really quickly, we'll come back and wrap up, and then we're out of here. So some helpful resources. Here is the GitHub repo, Spring into Kotlin, that has everything that I showed you and then some. So please do check it out. If you're interested in more Spring information at spring.io, more Kotlin information at kotlinlang.org, and for Kotlin events coming up in your area or anywhere else, kotlin.link. So please do check all that out, especially my repo, and see what you think. Give feedback. Pull requests welcome. And then, thanks for coming. So please do stay in touch, and see you around Heapcon.
Thank you.